IMF is coming to Trinidad in the next 2 weeks.
So I just watched a clip on TV6 News where news source was right. The IMF is coming to visit Trinidad in the next 2 weeks. They're coming to visit Central Bank and they're going to be making a report and yada yada yada. We know exactly what has happened to us whenever the IMF visits or whenever we do business with the IMF. They impose harsh policies and strict financial contingency plans for any country that does business with them. So, if we think things hard now, far less when the IMF done with us, we really had to be eating grass. So start to penny pinch from now. Start to have a little something stash from now because the IMF is coming and we all know, we have seen for our eyes what happens when the IMF does business with us, right? So, hoping for the best, but we all know what has happened to us when you see IMF step in before we, when we're doing business with the IMF. More cuts, more layoffs. May God help us all.
IMF.
Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to start off by giving all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakah Kodash. Double honor unto the apostles and the elders of the great millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the hopeful elect, beginning with the 144,000 men. Alright, back with another lesson. The IMF is coming to Trinidad. Alright. You know, as according to this this woman here, you know, her TikTok handle is Anaksu Namun, something like that. Alright, basically. And you know, the time that we in, you know, this is fitting that, you know, the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, is coming to Trinidad and Tobago because Trinidad and Tobago economy is not looking good. All right, what's going on now is that they need to borrow money now to keep things afloat. They're becoming desperate, you know, and with our government here, all right, you know, which being led by, you know, Ahidan, you know, she is basically has fully aligned herself with Babylon the Great. All right, fully aligned herself. Okay, she said she is partners with the U.S. All right, at the end of the day, and we always told, you know, we here, you know, in Great Millstone, you know, in Trinidad and Tobago, at least we know, we usually say we believe Trinidad and Tobago, you know, is just a mini Babylon. All right, and more, you know, is being proven. All right, more and more is being proven. You know, just what happened recently here with Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago aiding them in taking out the sitting president, all right, which is a wicked act and illegal. All right, at the end of the day, you know, they continue, you know, because the IMF is pretty much controlled mainly by the US, all right, and ultimately by the banking elites, the Rothschilds, etc., the bankers, the banksters, the central bankers, all right, and guess what they're coming to do? They're coming to visit our central bank, all right. You know, the majority of the nations on the face of the earth are part of this shit. You know, I think it's 189 countries out of 196. Okay, and you know, currently Trinidad and Tobago doesn't have any debt with them. You know, they have debt, you know, with other international interests, I believe China, etc., and public debt, which pretty much amounts to about 180 billion, I believe, 180 billion TT dollars, which is approximately what, 25 billion US. All right, 25 billion US, and pretty much, you know, as we, you know, each citizen in Trinidad and Tobago, all right, so-called citizen, bears a certain burden of debt, all right, because we know we own, just like in America, Babylon the Great, you know, you look at the debt clock, and you can see and the amount of that each citizens own. So if we owe about 25 billion US, you divide that by 1.44 million citizens, which is a recent approximate, which is significant because 144, right? All right, you know, when you divide that, you get about 17,000 about roughly 17,400 US each citizen basically owes the system. All right, and this is what these devils have gone around the world lending money, right? To own you. All right, because that's really what it is. When they go into these scriptures, it explains everything. Let's go here. Let's go to the book of Proverbs 22 and verse 7. It says, the rich ruleth over the poor. Who's the poor? Jacob in particular. Israel, the 12 tribes. All right. Mainly Judah, Benjamin, mainly Slovakia, your so-called blacks, Latinos, Native Americans. All right. So they rule over you. Job 9 and 24, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. All right. So the wicked has control of what? The money. All right. As I believe was Michelle Bauer said, give me control of a nation's money. And I care not who makes the law, because why? They're going to bend eventually. They're going to fall because they're going to get paid off. All right? This is what it is. So the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. And we all are borrowers. Basically, that's what it is. Going back into your loan, most Jakes, we just earning just enough to get by. Not enough to save anything. So, Jake be up in credit card debt, loan debt, all these things like that, and now the country itself is about to take some amount of debt, most likely. All right, so therefore they're going to own you even more. The amount owing per citizen is going to go up. All right, it's going to go up. And this is how they run you. This is how they get control of your resources and everything. All right, but via fraud. All right, so at the end of the day, it's violence too. All right, it's violence. Even though it mightn't seem like that, it is violence. The scripture say, he that keepeth back a man's wages, roughly paraphrasing, slayeth him. All right? So, hey, let's go here. Book of Micah, chapter 2. And verse 2, it says, and they covet fields, and take them by violence, and houses, and take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. So when you can't afford to pay, and you need something, you need help, you need that debt, they're going to come in like the Savior, and then they're going to put serious, heavy requirements on you, right? Which we know those requirements are leading to now, going back into the crash of the economy, the Great Reset. This is what they want. They want to crash that paper dollar. In order to do that, we have to go from place to place now, and the governments of the world have to owe them. So this is why they're coming in at this point. Then they need to come in and take control, all right, so that the economies of the world going to crash, and that they could help make that new world order and push that digital currency, all right. This is what ultimately goes back into. So they're going to come most likely, and they're going to push enact draconian measures, all right, as terms and conditions to getting that money, getting that loan money, all right. Draconian measures. Okay, so you can understand. Let's read this in the NLT. Micah 2:2 says, when you want a piece of land, you find a way to seize it. Right? Through what? Through debt. It says, when you want someone's house, you take it by fraud and violence. Right? So this is fraud. Because the list of terms and conditions for your loan, it's going to be draconian. All right? So that's going back into the law as well too. Going back into Isaiah, the 10th chapter. It says, you take it by fraud and violence. You cheat a man of his property, stealing his family's inheritance. And really, Trinidad and Tobago is the inheritance and the belongings of the Israelites. Right? The so-called Caribs and Arawaks were here before Columbus came. All right? This is what it is. So let's go to Isaiah 10. Isaiah 10:1. It says, woe to them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, written down, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, which is Israel, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. So this is what they're about. Setting Jake up, to take that MOTB. Because at the end of the day, these devils know that, as the scripture say, let's get here, Ecclesiastes 10:19. It says what? A feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things. So Jake need money to live, in a place to pay your rent, pay your house, house note, your car note, buy food, buy clothes, you take care of your family, everything else, So they know that. So it is where they're coming in with this, and it's gonna make things really tough, because Jake's salary hasn't been increasing, and a lot of people been laid off by this government. All right, they've been laying off people left, right, and center, especially Jake. All right, so if that continues, and then the prices of everything is going up. All right, according to as we see according to the scriptures in the book of Revelation. So all this is prophecy, Revelation chapter 6 and verse 5. See the third seal famine. It says, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, right, representing, slavery, and pestilence. All right. It says, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand, right? And this whole system, this whole US system is based off on fair, the IMF, etc., the World Bank. All right. These things based off on fair balances. All right. That's what it is. And what the Lord said about unfair, but in fact, let's get this here. We'll come back. Proverbs 20 and verse 23. It says, what diverse weights are an abomination unto the Lord, and a false balance is not good. Right? So the Lord doesn't like that. Right? The Lord doesn't like a false balance. All right. And this is what the system is about. The US dollar has been the world reserve currency. All right. Most of the governments of the world running off of debt. Right. The thick clay have teeth when they go into Habakkuk 2. All right. That thick clay, that's been the model that's been used by countries around the world. All right. That's the model that's been used. So you have to understand, this thing this ain't no joke. Okay. And they don't care about you Jakes. They don't care about you Jakes. They're going to come in here and they're going to make, one likely, some heavy conditions, right? Which going to cause hyperinflation. All right, because they want this thing has to, the whole earth, the economic systems, the monetary system have to crash like dominoes, one after the other. So that's what they're going to be coming in to set up, to make sure that happens, to make sure the New World Order plan gets accomplished. All right, which goes back into the book of Zephaniah 1 and verse 10. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that there shall be the noise of a cry from the fish gate, and a howling from the second, and a great crashing from the hills. Right, and all those bearing silver, like when they talk about Maktesh. All right. In fact, let's first read verse 11. It says, howl the inhabitants of Maktesh, for all the merchant people are cut down, they that bear silver are cut off. So things gonna happen real quick. All right, these things gonna fall like gonna fall one after the other, the economies of the world. All right, and they're gonna bring their solution. Right, so it goes back to the Hegelian dialect. Problem, reaction, solution. Problem is that the monetary system, which is based on debt, is crashing. Stock markets are crashing. The bond market is crashing. The real estate market is going to be crashing. All right, and things going to be hard. All right, shit is going to be hard. All right, just bear with my moment here. Shit is going to be harder than it ever was. Jake don't understand what's coming up here. Jake have no idea what's coming up here. Okay, it's going to have protests. You're going to have sedition among men because people are not going to be able to eat. All right, people are not going to be able to eat. So this ain't no joke that's coming up here. Let's get back to the book of Revelation 6 and continue reading. It says Revelation 6 and 5. Let's read it over. It says, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, right, which a penny represents a day's wages, right, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou hurt not the oil and the wine, which going back into the elect. So things are going to get hard. That's hyperinflation. The price is going to go skyrocketing high. All right. And they're not gonna care, right? They're not gonna care because they want that confusion, because they need to bring that order, right? They need to bring that solution, which will make them look like they're saviors. All right. Let's get Proverbs 18 and 23. It says, the poor use it entreaties, right? Which the poor represent who? You Jakes. And entreaty means what? Begging for mercy. All right? This is what Jakes be doing. It say, but the rich answered roughly, right? Which when you go into that word, roughly going back to be insulting, the draconian, being greedy, harsh, fierce, rough, not caring, not showing any pity. Right? The scripture say, Esau doesn't show no pity for the old or the young, roughly paraphrasing. So how are they going to do that? They're going to do that through the draconian legislation, the acts against Jake. All right? And ultimately, what is for is to set Jake up for that mark. All right? Ultimately, that's what it is. Right? Because they hate you Jakes, and this thing is about getting back their birthright. Right? They believe they can get back their birthright through unrighteous dealings. All right, let's go here. Micah. This is what Esau has always done in Micah 6. In fact, before I do this, let's get the book of James. And we got there. Let's get the book of James. James 2 and 5. It says, hearken, my beloved brethren, hath not power chosen the poor of this world, rich in faith, right? When you go into Habakkuk 2, tell you that. The just shall live by his faith, right? And heirs of the kingdom which he had promised to them that love him. But ye have despised the poor. Do not rich men oppress you and draw you before the judgment seat? And that's exactly what they're going to do. All right? And this is oppression they're laying upon Jake, knowing that, they wouldn't be able to take it. They're going to cry out. They're gonna go out in those streets, and protest, like what we've seen going on in the States for ICE. It's going to happen when Jake, which people in Trinidad are complacent, but when they really go hungry, it's going to force their hand. They're going to go out there, right? And that's exactly what Esau wants, right? To cause that confusion. This is why we tell you, let your defense be the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of this truth. Don't let your defense be money, or eventually it's going to be taken away. Eventually your money going to be useless. It's what happening in places like Venezuela. You basically have to walk with a barrel of money, what do you call these things? A big wheelbarrow, of money to buy a loaf of bread. And that's how bad hyperinflation could get. All right? And when you Jakes go out there, at the end of the day, they're gonna have justification. When you go and protest, justification to bring in things like the Insurrection Act, and martial law, right, to get control of you and basically try you. And a lot of Jakes gonna be unalived. Okay, that's what's gonna happen. Let's get the book of Micah, chapter 6 and verse 9. And it says, Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai's voice crieth unto the city, and the man of wisdom shall see thy name. Hear ye the rod, and who hath appointed it? All right, so the Lord is calling to his people, all right, via his prophets. All right, he's saying that these people are coming down. And yes, they are coming. Revelation 12 and 12 says they're going to come down with great wrath, knowing they have a short time. So this is what they're trying to accomplish quickly. It says, are there yet the treasures of wickedness in the house of the wicked, and scant measure that is abominable? All right, yeah, that's what it is. All right, and this is what the wicked does. They gain treasures by being unfair, by cheating, by stealing. All right, measuring out what unfair weights. Okay, dishonest measures. It says, verse 11, shall I count them pure with the wicked balances, and with the bag of deceitful weights? Right? No, they're not pure. Right? But you Jakes are going to pay. They are the rod of the Lord's anger upon his people. Right? For the rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth. So they know, these politicians know what they're doing. All right? They're sold out. They know what they're doing. All right? That's why you don't put your faith in Egypt. in Babylon the Great, in Trinidad and Tobago. All right, put your faith in the Lord. All right, that's what it is. Okay, it says, therefore also will I make thee sick in smiting thee, in making thee desolate because of thy sins. So the Lord is going to do that. When you're hungry, you become what? Sick. It says, thou shalt eat, but not be satisfied, and thy casting down shall be in the midst of thee, and thou shalt take hold, but shalt not deliver. And that which thou deliverest will I give up to the sword. Right? It is not going to be able to help you. They're gonna get everything. Okay? It says, thou shalt sow, verse 15, thou shalt sow, but thou shalt not reap. Thou shalt tread the olives, but thou shalt not anoint thee with oil, and sweet wine, but shalt not drink wine. Right? For the statutes of Omri are kept, we're marking that evil king, and the house of Ahab. Right? The example of Ahab, which is idolatry. Right? And you walk in their counsels. And that's exactly what they're doing in Trinidad and Tobago. Walking in the counsel of the wicked in all forms of idolatry. All right? Following after Babylon the Great. It says that I should make thee a desolation, and the inhabitants thereof an hissing. Therefore you shall bear the reproach of my people. And Trinidad and Tobago had been known as the hub of the Caribbean. All right? It's going to be made desolate very soon. All those who profited off of her, off of Trinidad and Tobago, and Trinidad and Tobago profiting off of Babylon the Great, these things going to come to an end. All right? But you Jakes here, you beware. Right? Beware, because why? At the end of the day, you're being set up. You're being set up for what? That mark. It says Job chapter 16 and verse 11. Ultimately, that's what it goes back to. All right? You're being broken down. You're going to be broken down to what? To take that MOTB. All right? Job 16 and 11. Power had delivered me to the ungodly and turned me over into the hands of the wicked. And that's what your government here that you Jake voted for, have done. All right? They turn you over to what? Babylon the Great, America. All right? Okay, which is the wicked, land of the wicked. Modern day Bozrah, the capital city of Esau, Edom. Who are the wicked? Right? The so-called white man. Verse 12 says, I was at ease, but he had broken me asunder. Right? The Jake was at ease. Things was good. Food was pretty cheap. And everything. Now everything is about to skyrocket. All right? He had broken me asunder. He had also taken me by the neck. All right? Just like the old yoke of iron that they had on you in slavery. Now it's going to be what? A legislative yoke and an economic yoke. All right? It's going to take you by the neck so what he can control you. And this is all about. It's all about total control. That's what the MOTB is about. The RFID micro chip. All right? The potato chip. It's about total control. Right? And shaken me to pieces. Right? That's what they're going to do. Through the economic policy that they're going to roll out. To shake it to pieces. All right? And set me up for his mark. And this ultimately, as I was saying, what they're going to do. All right? They're going to lay a trench about thee. All right? And keep you on every side. To push you towards that agenda. That new world order agenda. That's what it's all about. So beware. The IMF is coming to Trinidad and Tobago. And these devils, they have their agenda. The agenda is going to be played out. All right? Until the Lord, disappoints it. All right? So with that, I pray this lesson was edifying to you. Next time, Shalom wa Harag Babal.